Hey guys, in this video I'm gonna show you how to add custom ships to Windward. First as a client-side mod, and later as a server-side mod. Now before you actually get started here, you're gonna need to install Unity 4.6. Unity is the game engine used to create Windward and is also what should be used to create custom mods. To install Unity, simply go to unity3d.com, click on Get Unity, scroll down a bit, choose older versions of Unity, because I'm still in Unity 4.6 myself, not Unity 5. And choose 4x right here, and get the latest version of Unity. Currently that is Unity 4.6.9. So downloads Windows here, and just download the Unity editor. For the actual license of Unity, just get the free version. You don't have to pay anything in this case. Once you have Unity installed, download the mod folder from tasharan.com/windward/mod.zip. Inside this archive, there are two folders actually. First one is game resources, which is what it used to be before the October update. In here you will find the original configuration for the game, the ship names, town names, localization, pirate phrases that are used by the game. If you were to extract this folder into Documents, Windward, then you will be effectively overriding the game's configuration and telling the game to use these values instead. But we're not going to do that just yet. What we are interested in this case is the Windward modding folder instead. This is the actual Unity project for Windward's mods. So take this folder and extract it somewhere where you can actually find it later on. Like for example right here in Documents Windward. With this folder here, you will want to open it in Unity instead. So let's go ahead and do that. File, open project, open other, and find where you actually saved it. In this case it's my Documents, Windward, and Windward modding. You'll notice that this bottom part has disappeared, and now you get an option to select folder. That actually opens the project. Once it finishes loading, you're gonna see something like this. If you're familiar with Unity, then you can skip past this step. But if you're not familiar, let me explain. The hierarchy view shows you what is currently in the scene. The scene is like a loaded level basically. Speaking of scene, here's the scene view. It shows you what you have in here, and you can actually click on things and interact with them. Game view is what shows you what will be playing once you hit the play button, what the actual game is going to be like. We're not going to worry about it for the time being just yet. Inspector view shows you what you are currently examining. So if you're actually clicking on something like this, like a camera for example, you basically get details for this camera. There's also the project view that shows you what you currently have in the project. It's like a folder icon, folder window basically, shows you what's there. You can customize the look of the game if you want, like the look of these views. Personally, I tend to customize these quite a bit and move things around as well, just to make it easier for me. But anyway, this is up to you and totally not important at all. Here I've customized my UI slightly. I'm also going to make it so that I can actually see the game view and the scene view at the same time by dragging the game view. Here is fine. Okay. Open up the Windward Ship Explorer exporter scene. In this scene that you see here, you have a bunch of items in it, in a hierarchy. Hierarchy, as I mentioned, is what you actually have in the scene, so this is what you're working with. Canvas is just the user interface and is what you see here, like all these elements. They're not important at all, so don't worry about them. Event system, again, just with the user interface system, and just something that Unity adds for you. What we are interested in is two things. Miscellaneous just shows the sun which is what gives you light in the scene. Water, which is just a cube, nothing interesting to it. This is just the blue cube right here. You can see it by moving it around. Control Z, of course, is reverse whatever you just did. Main camera is what's used to draw whatever you're looking at. Wind is the wind of the game. That is what actually makes it possible to animate the sails that we'll get to in a bit. Instantiate objects that you see right here, all it does is just creates an instantiated prefab, in this case from the subfolder ships, and it's called the Zeppelin. Oops. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Let's hit play. When you hit play, it is going to load a ship into the game, which just happens to be referenced right here. So ships, Zeppelin gets instantiated. When you're in the scene view, you can use the middle mouse button to move it around, but more importantly, you can press F on the keyboard to focus on the object that you're currently examining. You can hold Alt and use the middle mouse button, or sorry, left mouse button to pan things around, which is useful, and of course the scrolling wheel to move in and out. The middle mouse button, as I mentioned earlier, can be used to pan the view. So you can look at this model from any angle. If you click on the game view, it gives it focus, and now you can use WASD keys to move the ship around to see how it behaves when you're able to control it. Also, you can actually select the ship itself by clicking on it and going to the root object. In this case, it's a Zeppelin clone. In Inspector, you get all kinds of details about this ship. Rigid body is basically what's used to move it around with physics. One thing we are going to be interested in looking at, though, is the ship script itself. If it's an airship, you're going to get a game airship script. If it's a regular sailing ship, you're just going to get a game ship script. In this case, it's a Zeppelin, so you get the game airship. You get a bunch of values to play around with, anything from ramming size to which prefabs get instantiated to create a wake and ghost effect. Don't worry about the ghost effect, by the way, this is just something I added for Halloween, so you can skip it altogether. Wind effect curve actually determines how the ship reacts to the wind. So 0 degrees, so if the angle of the wind is exactly from behind the ship, that's 0 degrees, you get 1, which is 100% of the wind strength. As it gets closer to 90 degrees, it's still at 100%, but past 90 degrees, it has a sharp decline in effectiveness, all the way down to 180, which is the opposite direction. So the wind will actually be blowing directly into the ship, like from the front of the ship. I'm not explaining this very well, but I hope you're getting the point. Anyway, this is the value that you will want to tweak if you want to change the behavior of the ship itself. Like, for example, if I was to drag it over here and change it like so, for example, like so, the ship would be far more difficult to get up to top speed, because you really have to align it with the wind really well for it to get the 100% movement speed. But we don't want to do this in this case. Okay, so there's one other button here called Fly Land that is available for airships. You can click it and of course it will rise up, letting you test it, what it looks like when it's up in the air. Again, WASD to move it around. You can play around with it, see what happens. You'll notice that everything animates properly, as it should. Propellers start spinning, particle effects start moving, and of course the cloth animates properly with the wind. If I was to select the wind object and then change the direction of the wind, the sails will respond accordingly. And you can actually tell by the pennant on on top of the main mast, which way the wind is blowing in this case. Okay, let's get down to it. Let's add a new ship to the game, something that is very different from anything else that is available in the game right now. Let's add a helicopter. I mean, why not? Now, looking at the helicopter, a helicopter is a flying vessel, right? Which means that the ideal ship to start with would be a Zeppelin. Well, you actually have a bunch of starting ships to work with. In the actual models folder in game models, you can find a brigantine, helicopter, which is what we'll be working on, turtle ship, and a Zeppelin. I wanted to include all the ships that actually are unique in some way. Zeppelin is the flying ship, turtle ship has the flame breath, brigantine is just a very simple ship that you can actually start with, and so on. Okay, let's start with the Zeppelin. To start with the Zeppelin, select the Prefab, which is a box-looking icon. Not this one. This one is the actual FBX. This is what comes from the artist. An artist will give you a model file, and that is what Unity will be able to import. You can drag this into the scene, but this is not what we'll be working with. We'll be starting with a pre-packaged file called a Prefab in Unity. So just drag it into the scene. You can drag it into the hierarchy view, or you can drag it directly into the scene. Doesn't matter much. In my case, I can just drag it here, it's fine. But I'll also want to reset the position to 000, just to make sure that it's in the right place. So this is the ship. In this case, we can actually select the instantiate object and disable it right here. This means that it will not run when you hit play. And when we actually do hit play again, this ship will already be here and it will be controllable, same as before. There are some differences, but I'll get into this in a bit. Alright, so just how is this made? Well, for the most part, you will not really care about it much, but just to give you a very quick overview. The root object is where the ship script is supposed to reside, that has all the properties you need for the ship, whatever innate skills the ship has, and the configuration for the ship itself, which is something that is normally saved in the config file. And that's exactly what happens when we export from here. You will have two files to work with: the model itself, that will be loaded dynamically, and the configuration file that you will be appending to an existing game's config file. There's also the gunner crew, which is what enables shooting at things. But again, this is not something that we'll be concerned with for the time being just yet. FOW revealer, that is what makes it possible to see in the game. It reveals the fog of war. That's what FOW stands for. The obstacle is what works with the pathfinding system to make it so that ally ships and enemy ships there can actually go around you instead of just ramming into your ship. Center of mass, this is what's actually used to animate the ship. If you actually do hit play, you will notice that the position of it might actually change from time to time in order to make the ship animate a bit. But again, it's not really important. What is important is the renderer. Inside the renderers, Rocky Boat, there are more game objects to work with if it's an airship than if it's like a regular ship. But since we are going to be adding a helicopter, we'll be working with a more difficult version. So Zeppelin, this is the actual model of the ship, and you can tell by the fact that it actually has the animation on it that references the ship's death. We will be replacing it, as well as with all the bones and everything inside of it, with a different model altogether. So Alt-Shift-A is actually a shortcut that can be used to enable and disable things very quickly. It's the same as clicking this check mark right here. What we will want to do instead is take the helicopter model, which is this, the FBX model. Remember I mentioned it has this white icon here. Drag it into where the Zeppelin used to be. So basically right here. Of course, now it is a little too big and we get to adjust its size to where we will be happy with it. Right now it's way too massive. There are two ways of adjusting sizes in Unity. One, you can actually use the scale tool, which is bound to, I believe, R key, yeah, to scale it around, scale it like this. But if you actually select child objects here, you'll notice that they already have a scale of 100 for some reason, and we'll want to reset that. Chances are, when the model was actually created in whichever modeling tool was used to make it, it just had odd scales in place. So as a mod maker, you will probably want to adjust the scale either here or by selecting the actual FBX itself and adjusting the scale factor right here. This is what dictates how the model is imported. By the way, when you're actually importing a brand new model, you will want to turn off the rig and animations for the most part. This will probably be set to legacy, definitely not humanoid. Humanoid is for humanoid characters, and ships are obviously not humanoid. So if you do want to import some animations or whatever, you will want this set to legacy and store in root. But in this case, the helicopter doesn't have any animations. Okay, so back to the hierarchy view. Yeah. So we do have a helicopter here, but it's actually facing the wrong way. And you can tell by this right here. Z is basically your forward. It actually points this way, and our model is pointing the opposite way. So again, there are different coordinate systems between Unity and modeling software. In this case, I'm guessing it was 3D Studio Max to create this model. So what we will want to do is fix this by changing the rotation to be 0. Same thing if there are any child objects that need to be fixed, but in this case it doesn't seem to be. Oh, this one does. Helicopter cannon. Where is the helicopter cannon? It's in the middle of nowhere. You know what? We're not going to care about the helicopter cannon. We're just going to delete it straight out. Okay, so another thing you may notice is the helicopter is actually under the water level. And that's not a good idea. Because right now, if we hit play, bad things will happen. Yeah, we are going to get error here, but more importantly, it's going to be completely underwater. That's not cool. Let's raise it up a little bit. We can do this by adjusting any of these. Actually, I'm going to put an animation node here. This is the root object for the model itself, and it does need to have an animation on it. However, it should be set to not play automatically, and for the clip, there's only one, ship death. If you don't specify this, it's fine. The game will actually take care of it for you. So don't worry too much. Alright, so this should actually remain at 0, 0, 0 with the default of everything, scale of 1, rotation of 0. So that means that we should not be moving this object, but we can move a child object to make it positioned as we want it to be. In this case, this seems to be fairly adequate. And I am using WASD to move around while holding the right mouse button, by the way. Useful to know. You may notice that there's this giant icon here for the sun, and it's quite annoying. You can actually turn this off by going to Gizmos and unchecking the 3D Gizmos part. Now it's much more manageable. Alright, so we do have a model here and it's pointing the right way. Excellent. What we now want to do is change it so it actually looks like a helicopter. Right now it doesn't have any materials. If you've imported a brand new model, then you probably have the materials checked here on the FBX itself, which means that it will have a material. But I always uncheck it, I always create a custom material. In this case, I already have one here. So I'm just gonna drag it into the scene right over the helicopter, over the rotor, and over the rear rotor right here. So there, I have a helicopter and it actually looks proper. Now if I actually hit play, guess what? I can move it around. Excellent. And I can even fly it. Now of course it's not animated, but hey, it is playable and you can actually put it into the game as is if you want. Of course we want to make it a little bit prettier than that. First, let's make the rotor spin. It's already in the right place and it can actually spin quite easily. So all we need to do is add a component called spin to it. It actually comes with the game itself. So this is how many rotations per second you want. So for example, let's say 4. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it's quite fast. Right? Yeah, I think it should be okay-ish. Let's see what it looks like with 2. 3. Yeah, 4 it is. Okay. Same thing with the rear rotor. We'll add a spin component to it, except in this case, I'm guessing the rotation needs to be on a different axis. And this will need to be the Z-axis by the looks of it. So 0, let's give it a 2. Hit play, see what it looks like. Yeah, let's make it a 3. That's good enough. Okay, so here's our helicopter, and it's able to move around, of course. It's all good. Well, that's all fine and great, of course, but what else does the Zeppelin have that the helicopter does not? Well, let's have a look. Cannons. That's kind of important. Cannons is what you need in order to be able to shoot at things. In this case, let's make these the cannons. They'll look good enough. There's 2 of them and they're both pointing forward, which means that we will only be able to shoot from the front, but hey, that's fine. That's totally fine. In normal ships, by the way, when you get ships like these, all the cannons, they're either on the port side or on the starboard side. And there may also be some in the back as well in this case. Which means that the actual damage of the ship, say for example it does 100 damage, right? But in this case there's 1, 2, 3, 4 cannons on the port side, 4 cannons on the starboard side, and 2 cannons on the back. So that's 10 cannons total, which means that each one is doing 10 damage out of that 100. That also means that since there's only 4 of them on each side, on the port side and the starboard side, that means that the ship is only doing 40% of the damage that it can be doing when it's shooting at something on one side of it. However, in this case, we have a helicopter that will have both cannons in front. That means that the damage will not be shared between the 2 sides of the ship. Instead, it'll be doing 100% of the damage in front. That will effectively make it twice as powerful as a regular ship. So bear that in mind when placing the cannons. And speaking of placing the cannons, let's just go ahead and do that. Drag and drop it underneath, well, let's say helicopter body, it should be fine. So now we have cannons here. Reset the position. Of course, the position of the cannons is totally wrong. So we're gonna get rid of, let's just get rid of all of them except 1. And then position this one to be where we want it to be. Now I'm gonna set it to isometric view for a second, just to make the positioning easier. Drag it into where it should be, which I believe is right here. Then change to front view and again adjust the position. There we go. Now I'm going to duplicate the object, and actually I'll just flip the X to make it be on the opposite side. So there, now we have two cannons positioned where they should be, and they're both facing forward. And that is very important, by the way they are facing. Are they facing the right way? Well, let's find out. From the global here, switch to local. Oh, they're not facing the right way. The blue arrow points which way they're facing. In this case, we want it to point this way, and instead it is pointing off to the side. That's not good. So change the rotation, in this case to be 0. Now it's pointing the right way. Same thing with this cannon. 270, wrong, it needs to be 0. There we go. Now it is pointing the correct way. It is very important when you're actually creating the ship to make sure that the cannons are pointing the right way. Otherwise, well, obvious things happen. Okay, with the cannons set up, we have to make sure that the original ship, and by the way, let's rename it helicopter, is pointing at the right set of cannons. Scroll down to gunner crew with the ship selected. In inspector view, it's referencing the route right here. So just tap it, it shows you that it is indeed pointing to the right one. Excellent. Okay, moving on. What else is needed? Well, fires. Fires is what shows the damage that has been done to the ship. And again, I'll just drag it into the right place. And now I need to actually position these fires. By selecting each fire in turn, I don't really see what's going on here. I mean, it's just an object positioned somewhere with a rotation, but I don't see anything. Well, we can actually view it fairly easily. Search the project view, there's a search field, search for fire. You get a bunch of fires, but the one we're looking for is called a small fire. So drag it into the scene to be underneath the fire itself. Now simply select the fire object underneath it, and you will see what it looks like when it's active. Now, of course, it is not in the right place, so we need to position it correctly. To do that, do not try to drag the fire object. Also, don't try to drag the small fire object either. Drag the root object where the game unit fire script is. That is what should be positioned correctly. So in this case, let's try to position it right there. We will be moving it like so. We will also want to adjust the rotation to, in this case, let's see, we'll want it to point this way a bit. So when this object is positioned, just again select the fire particle effect underneath, and you will see what it will look like when the unit is actually on fire. With this one in place, just you can safely delete the others, by the way. Just go ahead and right click on the fire. The number doesn't matter, by the way, this can be anything. Right click, duplicate, and I'll want to position it on the other side, so I'll just flip the X. And let's see what it looks like. Yeah. Now I've got two fires coming out of the rotors. That doesn't look safe, but that's good enough. Now that I'm actually happy with what they look like, I'm going to delete the small fire object, leaving only these two in place. I'll call it fire 2. So there. Save the scene. Now the ship is able to take damage and visualize this damage. Naturally, the more fires you have, the easier it will be to tell just how damaged the ship is. But don't try to go overboard with this, because the more particle effects there are in the scene, the slower the game is going to run. Generally, I try to keep these around 5 fires per ship. Some larger ones can actually go up to 7 though. Okay, let's see what else needs to be done. Have a Zeppelin here. Size-wise, well, the helicopter is actually quite small, but that's okay. It means it's more agile, or more agile looking. Underneath the Zeppelin we have the bones used for animation, but in this case the helicopter doesn't have any bones. And I am actually going to cover the bones themselves a little bit later. So let's see what else. Sails, pennant attachment. Pennant attachment is actually useful if you are trying to put a pennant on top of ship. In this case, there is no pennant, so it doesn't need to be there, but let's just see what it looks like. I place it here. Again, the blue arrow shows which way it's supposed to be pointing. Hit play. And there's a pennant here on top of the rotor. Obviously, in real life there wouldn't be anything like that, so I'm just going to get rid of it in this case. Other than that, I believe we have everything we need for the ship. We have cannons, we have fires, we have rotors. Yeah, that should be it. Excellent. Let's get rid of the old Zeppelin object, select the helicopter, and now we can actually save it as a prefab, but in this case we don't really care. What instead we're going to do, save the scene, is right click on the game airship script right here, just right click it, and you get these options: export configuration, export model. In this case we can actually export the model itself, which will be all of that bundled together. Let's do that. Let's export the model. When we export the model, it gives you an option of where to put it. We're gonna want to, well, in order to test it, it's easiest to just go ahead and save it wherever the project is, which in this case, it's in Documents, Windward, Windward Modding, Assets, Game, Resources. Resources is the folder that Unity is able to look for objects in. So everything that we're trying to load dynamically needs to be in the resources folder while we are inside the Unity editor. Anyway, we are actually going to be looking inside the ships folder. So here we're going to save helicopter, replacing the one I have there. There. Now we have a helicopter exported as a brand new model. We can now select this helicopter and disable it. Also, we get to enable the instantiate object script and change the Zeppelin to be helicopter here. This is how we actually test to see if we've done everything correctly. So hit play and the helicopter will now appear, same as before. The only difference is now it's actually loaded from within the project's resources folder. And yeah, it's going to be the same thing. It's controllable exactly the same as before. It can fly, same as before. All is working fine. There are a couple of other things that need to be done before we move forward and actually test it within the game. First, when you actually enable the helicopter, in this case, you may notice that there are additional green outlines here. They are actually outlines for colliders. Colliders is what is used to check collision between objects. In this case, the Zeppelin actually had a pretty big collider on top because that was the collider for the balloon itself. We definitely don't need that. So let's find the colliders subsection here, and on top we have, or on the bottom rather, we have these. So hull for the top, bottom, ballast. That is actually used for, well, it's basically a clutch within the game. When the ship happens to roll on the side, this forces it back upright. It prevents it from capsizing. It's workaround for a glitch in the physics. Anyway, capsule. This is what we don't need. This is definitely something that is not there in the helicopter. So I'm just gonna go ahead and flat out delete it. Ballast we're gonna keep because it keeps everything upright. However, let's see if it's actually positioned more or less properly. And let's move it off to the side just a little bit. It's better. Okay, for the bottom, this generally defines how deep the ship goes under the waves. In this case, it's just a little bit. We do have no part of the model going underneath the wave, so we can technically do something like this, but then it's going to be possible for this vehicle to drive on top of the terrain. I don't know if it's something that you actually want. In this case I don't, so I'm just going to leave it down here. For this collider, I'm going to change it a little bit as well. X, Y, Z, and just make sure that it actually more or less aligns with the model. This way, when I actually collide with something, it will behave more or less proper. Of course, if you need more colliders to create additional shapes, you can do that. You can just duplicate these ones, alter the shape, or do whatever it is you want. In this case, I'll put this here. Okay, more or less proper. When I actually have the collider selected, I should be able to see what I have there. I don't have any sails here, so nothing will be on the sail layer, and all the colliders that I do have are on the hull layer. The layer is actually up top here. This is what defines what will be colliding with what. It is very important to make sure that the colliders used to show where the hull is are actually on the hull layer, and keep the ballast on the ballast layer. This way we will not be interfering with anything else in the game. Okay. Couple of other things. For the obstacle, this is what defines the region that this unit will essentially take up in the world. There definitely needs to be quite a bit of padding here. So in this case, due to the propeller, I probably want it to be a little bit wider. So I'm just going to change this to be like that. And I guess 11 is fine in this case. You definitely want to leave a little bit of space on the sides. Don't try to make it tight fitting, because it's not going to work very well. AI tends to cut corners, that's why. Okay, what else needs to be done? Oh yeah, on the explosion, on the ship explosion, certain things need to be disabled. Like, it doesn't make sense for the rotor just to keep spinning after the ship has exploded. In order to do that, select helicopter, and here 2 new fields appeared, and I've actually added these after a short break on my end. Disable an explosion. This will disable the object as soon as the ship explodes. Disable after the explosion. This will disable certain things a certain time after the ship has exploded and has been sinking. This is ideal for things like colliders, for example, to make it possible to pass through the ship. In this case, it's only referencing the ballast, but I can also reference the hull top and hull bottom as well. This way, it will be possible for anyone to just go right through it soon after the explosion. On the actual explosion itself, I want to disable the rotors, which are here. So again, with the helicopter selected, I'll just drag and drop things into here. Actually, 2 fields, drag and drop, 1, 2. This way, when the helicopter will explode, The rotors will instantly vanish. Okay, I believe, oh yeah, the configuration. This is also important. Oh, well, I'm here actually. Forward force and turn rate. Forward force is what determines how quickly the helicopter accelerates forward, and its ultimate speed is still controlled by things like speed stats and the engine torque. You can play around with these. I'm not going to cover them here. Turn rate is how quickly the ship turns in the air. This is only for the air. I'm gonna bump this up to, well, let's say 10, just to make it go faster. For the configuration, this is where you determine how the ship will show up in the game when you look at it in the town. So cargo slots, helicopters are pretty small, so I'm gonna change this to 2. Town size, it needs town size 10, but hey, let's make it 1. Why not? Minimum tier, this is when you will start seeing NPCs using these ships in the game. Tier is actually talent points divided by 3. So since it's 25 here, it means that it will require a region level of 75 before they can actually appear in the game. I really don't want NPCs using helicopters because their AI is not optimized for forward shooting cannons, so I'm just going to put a 999 here, which means they're never going to appear. Price, this is how much you're going to have to pay in order to unlock the ship. I'm just going to set this to 1 gold. Stats of the ship. Defense, it's weak. Support is weak. Offense is crazy high. Whoops, 9. 9 is 900%. 1 is 100%. Mobility, 1.2 speed. I'm gonna set it to 2, make it really quick. I believe this concludes it. Oh, max yaw. Oh, by the way, this is how much the angle can deviate between the angle in which the cannon is shooting and where the target is. So if you set it to 180, it's actually going to be able to fire at anything in a 360-degree radius around it. Probably not what you want. If you set it to 10, then it's going to have a very narrow angle of attack. Again, not something you want. In most cases, 30 is generally pretty fine. I'm gonna keep it at that. So again, with this saved, I'm going to export the model, save it as a helicopter again, and again test it, disable the existing object, instantiate is still set to instantiate a helicopter, play, and it is fine. If I actually select the helicopter, oops, the instantiated one, I can see all my values are set up correctly. Everything is more or less fine. The values are not going to match anything correctly. That's because they don't come from the model file. This gets actually exported separately, which is something I should cover now. By default, when you export a model, you're only exporting what it looks like, basically. In order to export the stats and make it appear in the game, you will want to right-click it again and choose to export configuration. When you do that, it is looking for the config.txt file. So if I was to export it into an existing game, I would just double-click on the existing config file and it would work. In this case, I want to export it as a mod. So let's go ahead and create an actual game mod first. In Documents, Windward, I'm going to go into the mods folder. If you don't have this, you should create this folder, mods folder. And in here, I'm going to create a new mod. I'm going to call it just helicopter. Inside this file, I'm going to save the config as is. And there it is. Now there is a configuration file. Now that we know that the model actually works correctly, we can either copy this file from here to the mod folder or just go ahead and export it right away. Again, export model. I'm gonna export it into documents, Windward, mods, helicopter. Just, oh yeah, right, I should make a folder for it, ships. Because everything is supposed to be loaded from the ships folder if it's a ship. So helicopter.bice, I'll just save it as is. And that's it. We should now be able to load it in the game. Let's give it a shot. Before working with mods, it is important to create a copy of your player file instead. Because if you were to go into the game with an existing player file, it'll give you a warning saying that your character will now be bound to those mods. And we don't want that. So in the Documents, Windward, Players folder, you can find your player files. You can just copy and paste to create a copy of it. I'm gonna call it second MOOC. That'll be my player file. What else? Yes, mods. Since we do have a mod here, and it is actually called a helicopter, while it will work in a game, it will not be visible in towns until you actually encounter and defeat the ship a couple of times. And we happen to have set the configuration file to minimum tier of 999, which means it will never show up in the game to begin with. So that's not good. It means we physically cannot unlock this ship, and it will never actually appear. Let's change this. Let's change this to be the Zeppelin instead. We're basically going to be overriding an existing model of the Zeppelin, replacing with the helicopter instead. So ships, I'm also going to rename this to Zeppelin. Okay, time to test it. So I launched Windward here, and it's giving me an option to choose the mod. I'm going to choose the helicopter mod because, for obvious reasons. Now I go into single player, choose the second MOOC character instead of Aaron MOOC. I'll be going into the public campaign. In this case, you can just keep your own world. It's giving me a warning saying that I'm using new mods. Are you sure, if I want to be binding these mods to the player file, or the other way around rather? Yes, I am sure. I'm going in. And there it is. I was actually flying a Zeppelin before, and now my Zeppelin looks like a helicopter. Flies, everything works correctly. I can land, I can take off. In the ship, it is showing up as Zeppelin. Yeah, my current ship. Let's give it a try in an instance, see if it actually works there. I'll just start a regular combat instance. And I got a ghost ship here. Halloween setting is enabled. Now I just need to find some enemies. This will be excellent. So this ship fires only from the front, and it does quite a bit of damage. Problem is I'm actually specialized in support right now, which is completely wrong for this kind of ship, because it's all offensive, and I die a horrible death. But the point is, it works, it fires from the front, and everything is correct. And explosions and everything is working right. Awesome! Okay, in order to create a complete mod, and I've renamed it back to a helicopter by the way, both in the config and here, you'll also want to create a localization file. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Just a text file called localization.txt. Open it up, and here I have values. As always, the language, in this case it's English, and the key, some value. In this case, helicopter is helicopter, and helicopter info is newly modded ship. just like that. If you happen to have commas in the string, make sure to wrap it in quotes like this. Okay, let's see. I have this ship unlocked actually now. You will not, but I do. And going back into the game, it is now going to be a 16th ship in the game. Yep, at the very end. And there's a localization. Helicopter is showing up as a newly modded ship. So Windward is actually pulling configuration data and localization data from the mod folder and merging it with the existing game. Everything is showing up correctly. Okay. If at any point you want to examine any of the ship that actually comes with Windward, you have them right here. All of the ships, they're here. Obviously, you cannot drag data files directly into the world or scene. It doesn't work that way. But you can instantiate them. So in a helicopter, in instantiate game object, say for example, I wanted to examine the, let's say, Viking ship. Now if I hit play, it will bring up the Viking ship here, and I can see exactly how it's done by selecting it. So for example, Viking ship adds archers right here by simply having a game object underneath it with the instantiate prefab script attached, telling it to create a prefab called archers, attaching it as a child. And that's all it is. That's all it takes to add archers to an existing ship. Same thing with all the other special abilities. Well, Turtle Ship is a bit more complicated, which is why I actually included it as an actual prefab so you can have a look at it. But the idea is the same. You will always be simply instantiating something else as a child of the existing ship. You cannot write scripts and you cannot reference particle emitters, particle systems rather, from within mods, because scripts are not going to be included in the mod. Likewise, the particle systems, they're not going to be included simply because Unity did not expose them to a scripting serialization at all. It's an oversight on their end. But other than that, everything will work. There's plenty of scripts to choose from in Windward, plenty of effects. So simply examine the ships and go at it. And that's it, I guess. Oh, one other thing. If you wanted to create a server-side mod, you would probably just follow the README file. It explains it fairly well. But just to give you a quick overview, all you have to do is take the mod file that you have here with the configuration data and the ship's data, simply take it up a couple levels. In Windward, here I'm going to rename this as, actually I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to call it helicopter.txt. For the ships, I'm going to place it here. Oh, there's actually a helicopter.txt here, so let's just do that. I'm going to delete that. So there's a helicopter file inside my documents, Windward ships, as well as the txt file. Txt file actually contains the localization data for it as well. So not only includes the data that we had in a previous configuration file, but it also includes the section for localization. This means that I don't actually have to create this file anymore, because the localization information is going to be uploaded as part of the ship. Then in the game, all I have to do is log onto the server where I want this ship to appear, and I have to be an administrator. And then, where's the README file? And then I have to run these two commands. Upload ships, in this case it will be helicopter bytes, and then set ships helicopter.txt. It will automatically search in the My Documents Windward folder. So as far as I'm concerned, it will find these files, which are in my documents Windward chips. It will upload this file, which is the actual ship, and it will then set, or it will rather append the configuration data to the server's configuration data. And that's all it takes. The ship will then appear for all the players. All the players will automatically download this file, and this will be automatically set for everybody as well, and the ship will appear in the game. That's it. If you have any questions, let me know on the Steam forums, preferably though, not on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and enjoy modding Windward.